starting to get punishing gusts and a whistling sound of the wind.
The 2025 hurricane season is going to be a memorable one for sure, Rob, as this was a little bit of a weird season, all things considered.
Yeah, you know, a lot of people in the United States didn't really see much of an impact from this hurricane season, although we saw remnant moisture, we did see a tropical storm move inland, and as we look at the numbers, this kind of looks like it fit the mold for the forecast, though it was a bit of a different season.
Yeah, a little on the low side with some of the numbers, but there were still some impacts that a lot of us felt here, whether they were direct or indirect. I mean, this is, for the number of storms we didn't have, what we did have were monsters out there.
Absolutely. 3 Category 5 storms, 4 major hurricanes. So that kind of went to the top end of that forecast. Yeah. And our seasonal energy actually ended up above average in terms of the ACE, the accumulated cyclone energy, because of those 3 Category 5 storms.
And I think that's maybe the most laughable part of this whole season. While it was fairly quiet, all things considered, we're still above average when you talk about some of the accumulated cyclone energy. And this is why I think a lot of folks might think this was a quiet year. Almost all of them stayed out to sea.
Unless you live in Bermuda.
Exactly. I don't know what Bermuda did this year, but they were in the path of most of these things, and some of them were monsters themselves too.
Yeah, some of them were huge storms. Thankfully, Bermuda was spared the worst impacts from many of these storms, and Imelda went very close to the island, didn't have a direct landfall, but it did bring some impacts to the island. They had to brace for those impacts 5 times.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of those landfalls here as we go forward. And again, this is one of those things that you don't have to have direct landfall, right? It's one of those things that we've got all sorts of threats out there out to sea, but we can still get the problems with them.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the bigger headline when we first start talking about our system that brought in a lot of moisture. And folks may not associate the Texas floods with Barry, but unfortunately Barry just sent record precipitable water into the Lone Star State and triggered some of those very heavy downpours.
Yeah, I think that we're all going to remember the catastrophic flooding in the Texas Hill Country there, but you don't really remember that where that was coming from. It was tropical in nature. And again, Barry didn't have a whole lot of problems here as it was making landfall in northern Mexico there.
That's right. It was all a couple of days later after that moisture started moving north and hit an MCV. Of course, Barry wasn't our only system to actually bring direct impacts or maybe some indirect impacts to the United States. We had a landfalling system in Chantal.
I mean, it was kind of like a 4th of July bottle rocket. It formed, and then all of a sudden it was making a beeline for the mid-Atlantic states there. It made landfall not too long after the 4th of July.
That's right. So we had some heavy rainfall coming down in those areas, but you know, this was the big thing this season for folks in North Carolina. We had multiple storm systems staying well offshore, but those still produced big impacts for folks in the Outer Banks.
Aaron's really a good example of impacts occur well away from the center of the storm, but we have to keep in mind tropical storm force winds extend more than 200 miles from the center. So we will see impacts in North Carolina, specifically along the immediate coastline, and especially the Outer Banks, where we'll see some beach erosion, ocean overwash, and portions of Highway 12 probably impassable for at least a couple days.
And I remember, we were talking about Aaron, and the initial concern was this thing going to get close enough to make landfall, right? And that's where a lot of folks go, but it does not have to make direct landfall to have some sort of direct impacts, especially if you live in a coastal area.
Absolutely. I mean, that was the thing we were watching with this system in Umberto as well. Did a little dance off the coast and actually helped to pull Imelda farther offshore. But we had those big impacts from multiple systems that stayed well offshore that unfortunately led to multiple homes collapsing out there in the Outer Banks.
Yeah, and we were talking about, how close of a call this could have been to getting into the Gulf. And thankfully, because we had such a monster out in the Atlantic, it was given that tug on that tropical cyclone there. But yeah, this is the thing, right? Not indirect impacts. And if you live in a coastal area, you felt these as soon as Umberto was pulling away. And that was kind of the weird thing. It was well after it passed us.
Of course, the biggest storm of the season, at least the biggest impacts we had in the basin in general, was from Melissa.
It's the afternoon after Hurricane Melissa. Spent the morning just kind of touring the area, just walking around, and the destruction, the scale of it is hard to describe. It's extreme. I just feel terrible for the folks here. I just don't know how they're gonna put the pieces back together. It's gonna be a long effort.
Yeah, Melissa's destruction, unfortunately, is going to be something that lasts a really long time. Folks in Jamaica, it's going to take them years, if not longer, to build, where the strongest core of winds came on shore, 185 miles per hour sustained, with gusts that were even stronger.
Yeah, I mean, incredible numbers. It was intensifying all the way up until landfall, and we were watching this as it happened, and in disbelief, in all honesty. As tiny as that core was, it just kept cranking and cranking and never went through one of those eye wall replacement cycles.
That's right. We had a lot of we had depth of water for this thing to churn through. It never had cold water upwelling either. So all of those traditional factors that could potentially weaken a hurricane, they just weren't there with this storm. And that led to that destructive landfall, the second strongest on record that we have without that post-storm analysis.
Yeah, and I think we're going to remember this forecast for a long time, whether it's from that uncertainty that started us out to how this thing unfolded as it went all the way up through landfall.
Yeah, I mean, the strongest hurricane that, at least in terms of damage that I've ever seen, in terms of wind damage, Josh Morgan said something similar. He's been through 70, 80 of these hurricanes, said was the worst wind damage he's ever seen, and the strongest winds that he's ever experienced.
Yeah, anytime you're talking about, debarking a tree, that you're talking about really high-end winds. That was a look back at 2025. Of course, we're going to be here at WeatherNation for 2026.